All right, let's now talk about what's happening in Afghanistan. Even as we speak, the Taliban that has taken over the country just about 24 hours ago is holding its first, believe it or not, press conference in which they are saying things like they will not allow their territory to be used for terror attacks. They've said that neighboring nations need not worry. They've said things like embassies and human rights missions will be allowed to work, and women's rights will be upheld if they behave under Sharia law. So this image makeover has been going on for the last 48 hours or so, with the Taliban claiming that and trying to show that they are a reformed lot. They've allowed news anchors who are women back on air on Afghan channels as with reporters. But can they truly be trusted? Well, probably not. Right now, it's a fight for legitimacy and letting other countries recognize it. Meanwhile, in the Indian context, we've managed to successfully evacuate all our workers and our officers from our embassies. It was a 2-day mission, but finally everyone seems to be out. There are still civilians who may be stuck, and those processes are still on. But today we're going to talk about another aspect that also needs to be focused on, which is India's interests in Afghanistan beyond this. Now, over the last 20 odd years, India has invested about $3 billion in Afghanistan. We have 400 projects ongoing. We've built the parliament in Kabul. And there are several other projects. There are hospitals, roads, bridges, dams, solar panels for villages, and we've been heavily involved in the nation building portion of it. So what happens to all of that now? What happens to trade between the two countries? It's a bilateral trade worth over $1 billion. Exporters have shown concern about what happens to those trades. Can they still continue to send stuff over there? Will there be credit worthiness? To speak on some of these aspects, I'm joined today by Sharad Kumar Saraf. He's former president of the Federation of Indian Exporters Organization. Arvind Goenka, chairman of Plexconcil, also on the show, as is Biswajit Dhar, professor at Center for Economic Studies and Planning at JNU. Welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for speaking with us today. Professor Dhar, let me go across to you first to just set the context of how heavily India has been engaged in Afghanistan and with the former Afghan government over the last several years.
Yeah, India has been playing a very critical role in the rebuilding of Afghanistan over the past 20 years. And, you mentioned earlier the kind of projects that we have undertaken. And we're actually looking at longer time frame. And remember, Afghanistan was included in the SARC, in the South Asia project. And the whole idea was that going forward, with the help of, a friendly Afghanistan and, the whole SARC process, and therefore the South Asian Free Trade Agreement, all these kinds of, the positives that we can leverage. We're trying to do that. And so both bilaterally and regionally, India was investing heavily in the rebuilding of Afghanistan, and we had very high stakes, and you can name any sector, and and where we were involved there, and our companies were not only making sort of huge investments, and they're gaining a lot. Because I was just looking at the trade figures, on the last. From 15-16 to just before the pandemic, our total trade with Afghanistan actually doubled. So that was the rate at which we were actually growing, and certainly this development is going to be a major setback, the kind of aspirations that India had in terms of sort of doing business with Afghanistan.
The other concern is that all of this infrastructure that has been built, all of these investments which have been made, are now under the control of a Taliban regime. On the other hand is the plight of the Afghan people. So what do we continue to do? Mr. Saraf, will you continue to export to Afghanistan? Is that credit worthiness there? Will things resolve and resume to business as usual? Because they're also heavily dependent on Indian imports, aren't they?
Yes, I would, for sure. I just heard the Taliban press conference a few minutes ago, about 15-20 minutes ago, and the Taliban spokesman made it very clear that they are going to continue with their infrastructure projects, they are going to continue with the international trade, they are going to put things in a proper order, and from what feeling I got from his language as well as his body language is that Taliban means serious business. So I think we should not just assume only the negative side of the past 20 years back Taliban. I have a feeling that this time they are going to be a kind of a different leaf altogether, and they really mean business. Having said that, as you rightly pointed out, we built a lot of infrastructure. Now that is for them to see. The Taliban is seeing, the Afghan people are seeing what all we have built for them, and they would need it. They have to finish the projects that we have started, and for this they would need us. They would need the upkeep and continuity of the past projects, for which again they would need us. So I have a feeling that apart from a minor setback, for a short time, we would come back, and maybe we may not achieve the same growth rate as in the past, as pointed out by Professor Dhar, but I have a feeling that we will have a sustained growth of trade with Afghanistan. Afghanistan is our very strategic ally. We need them badly.
Mr. Saraf, yes, they are. They are, no doubt, but that was the Afghan government. Mr. Saraf, you're one of the few people who is willing to trust what the Taliban is saying today, and I'm curious as to why. Why are you willing to take them at face value?
Well, let me say why not. There is always a potential of a change in a person in 20 years' time. Even Taliban has grown. So why take a negative view to start with? I think that's not the right or correct approach. Maybe we can wait and watch. Maybe we can see whether they mean business, whether they walk the talk. But I just saw the interview of their government official spokesperson, and he said very good things. He said they are going to honor all the women's rights, but of course as per Sharia laws, and they are going to ensure safety and security of everyone. Yeah. They have pardoned all the old soldiers who fought against them. They have pardoned everybody. They have asked all the interpreters and contractors to stay back. They want everyone to stay back in the country. So let's give them a chance. And secondly, as you rightly said in the beginning, that if I have the security of my funds, if the banking channels are working properly, and if letters of credit are coming, I see no harm in dealing with Afghanistan. If the payment is secure, what's the problem? Why should we deal with them? In fact, we should try to encourage dealing with them.
They are a known terrorist organization which would bother some governments and people around the world. But anyway, let me go across to Mr. Goenka and get him into this conversation. Do you share the optimism that Mr. Saraf has this evening, that the Taliban are a reform lot, because they're saying they are? And it's not the first time they've said they are.
No, I fully subscribe to Saraf Saab's views. And especially, if I'm talking about plastics exports, plastics are products of necessity. Whether it's a terrorist organization or whatever, the citizens of the country need the plastic goods. And I think India will be a natural source for them. And today I happened to speak to some shipping lines and some freight forwarders, and they said that our freight routes are all well established. But right now, due to fear of theft or pilferage, we have just discontinued the services for a couple of weeks. But as things improve, we will start exporting. We'll resume our services. And as regards plastics exports, we are exporting PP woven sacks and PP woven fabrics, which are used to pack the agriculture produce. We are exporting medical disposables, which are a necessity. Then writing instruments are going there, pipes and fittings are going. say PVC flooring or PVC leather cloth is going. So these are all products of necessity, and they will continue to go. And I feel that as a country they will need these goods, and India should should encash this opportunity and become a major supplier to Afghanistan. Of course, after the banking channels are established and after the safety and security are taken care of. We should wait for a couple.
So this is the concern for the Indian government right now, that should. Yes, Mr. Saraf.
Can you give me 1 minute? If we won't supply the goods, China will. Will that be in our interest? Do we want China to take over Afghanistan like they are trying to take over other smaller countries? China was looking for this moment for the US to move out from there. And as soon as the US have moved out, China wants to get in. So it's all the more reason that we increase our supplies, we increase our relations with Afghanistan, and anyhow prevent China from getting into Afghanistan. So this is
I don't know, Mr. Saraf, there is something like a moral lens that you look at things through. Will the Indian government give legitimacy to a Taliban-backed regime? Did we do that when the Taliban was in power 5 years ago? I want to just get some perspective from Professor Dhar over here. Can it be business as usual? Because remember, there is more to this story. The Taliban force right now is backed by Pakistan. So do we really want to get into this whole race about who supplies what to Afghanistan, or do we need to be wary at this point? What's your take?
Yeah, there is a larger, sort of geopolitical economic issue which is staring in the face, because, the first thing is that about recognizing this regime. After all, like you mentioned that, this is a terrorist organization. It is a recognized terrorist organization which has taken over reins of power. And I don't think that, the Western governments are just going to jump in and sort of recognize this government. And India, of course, will not do that, because there are all kinds of wheels within wheels here. And as Saraf Shah was saying that, the China factor, in fact, China has already started talking to, Taliban, and already, they're making these kinds of, moves to get into Afghanistan. So it's a very complex story, led by the fact that, this is a terrorist organization there. So I think that, all these banking channels and all this sort of opening up will also be conditioned on what stance the Western governments sort of take. And I think if they don't give legitimacy to this government, then it's going to take a long time to actually do this. So I think India will have to wait and watch. I don't think that, it will be prudent to just get into a discussion with Taliban right at this point, because I don't think that, and if we try to jump the gun and start talking to Taliban, then of course I fear that I'm giving wrong signals that we are already lining up to recognize this government. So I think the prudent thing for us would be to wait and watch, and to see how this whole the scenario plays out. What would be the next steps that Taliban takes? Because we didn't have we had awful relations the Taliban then, and I think we continue to have that now. So I would say that so prudence is the best thing for us, and I think it will be better for us to really buy our time.
Yeah, and also there is something called a moral obligation that a nation has. We have to see if the sins of the past can be forgiven just because the Taliban says that they want to turn a new leaf. Would that same thought then be extended to the Al-Qaeda or to ISIS or to Pak-based terrorist organizations? If today they say, hey, we don't want to do this anymore. But, let's come back to some perspective over here. Mr. Goenka, in the 5 years that the Taliban regime was in power before the United States came in, what was the business relationship at that point? Did we ever do business with the Taliban in the past?
I don't recall that we had business relations at that time, because like it was a long time ago, and a lot of water has passed since then. And but again, I would say that Indian goods were going into Afghanistan. It was being routed through third countries, especially from UAE. So the Afghani buyers, they knew about Indian goods, and once things opened up, they did travel to India, maybe for medical checkups and medical health, and they have been buying from India very regularly. And there are well-established transport lines which carry goods from here to Karachi and to Bandar Abbas, and from there goods are taken to by road to Afghanistan. So there exists Indian presence, and Afghanistan has been exporting all their agriculture produce to India, the dry fruits and all what they produce. And for that, both the governments have also established the air corridor, which air freights all these items from Afghanistan to India. So definitely we have had relations. Maybe that at that time the relations may have been via a third country, but after that the relations have been quite strong. So I mean, once things settle down, then business should again start with India, until unless Afghanistan does something which makes Afghanistan and India an enemy, like our immediate neighbor. If that doesn't happen, and if they manage the country well, then I think the Indian businessmen should also extend their hand to do business with them. That's what I feel. But let's see how the government, how both the governments communicate, how they set up their bilateral ties, what they decide about.
And what happens to this? We are at a pivotal moment right now. We're at a pivotal moment right now where the Taliban regime is trying to get legitimacy. It's trying to get players to recognize its rightful place to rule the Afghan people. And while all sympathies are there with the Afghan people, will the world and will India deal with the Taliban government? That is what has to be seen very closely. What also has to be seen is whether they walk the talk. What they're claiming today, do they really do it when everyone stops watching? So it's going to be a complex situation unfolding, but this is a very interesting perspective to see today, because there are deep trade relations as well between India and Afghanistan. We don't really need them as much as they need us. We import largely dry fruits from Afghanistan, but they depend on us for a lot of basic things that we export to them, as well as the infrastructure that we've helped build. Where will that go? We have to watch this space. Thank you to all of you for joining us on this debate. We'll take a very short break.